So last year, one of the most popular games to come out on Steam Early Access was a game called Gloomwood, a sort of a mishmash of your classic survival horror games and immersive sims. You know, we love immersive sims around here. And more specifically, I guess, stealth-based immersive sims, games like Thief and Dishonored. The early access version of the game that's up on Steam right now contains the opening 4 hours or so, and has you creeping through buildings where you attempt to stealth and stab your way through their creepy inhabitants. And in case it wasn't obvious enough, the graphical style is intentional. This is very much an homage to early 2000s first-person games. It is, after all, being made by New Blood. Survival horror and immersive sim are two of the most popular genres when it comes to discussing game design. You can't swing a cat on YouTube without hitting a video essay about one of those genres. Games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill, games like Thief, Dishonored, and Deus Ex. So what happens when you try and merge those two genres together, stealth games and survival horror games? What happens at the intersection of those two genres? When do they play nice and cooperate with each other, and when is there friction? Gloomwood plays a lot with elements of both genres. It's stealthy, the guards mutter, there's sound propagation and shadows you can hide in. But there's also elements of survival horror in here too, things like ammunition scarcity, inventory management, and restrictions on when you can save. So today we're asking developer Dillon Rogers to break down the design of Gloomwood. But let's start with the part of our Thief documentary that I think I found the most fascinating. How Looking Glass Studios did all of this groundbreaking work when it came to sound propagation and lighting, and then for decades nobody picked up the baton. That is, until now.
When I started doing these kind of things, I knew that, like, okay, if we're gonna do this, I'm gonna have to go back to Thief and see how they did it, and then we can sort of like see where it could be expanded. So some of the like papers and interviews that the Thief developers posted up, like that was a long development cycle that went through a lot of different developers. So there was a little bit of confusion of like, oh, are we reading the light maps off the floor to do visibility, or are we like raycasting against every single object and seeing like, oh, is a pillar blocking this light? The demo used that method, but the current game uses the raycast method. One of the things that pretty much everyone asked for in the demo was like, hey, we want to like be able to break all the lights. Like Thief has this element, like you can douse all the torches. Most of the electric lights in Thief cannot be destroyed because Garrett doesn't have strong enough materials. But in Thief 2, you can turn off a bunch of lights. For Gloomwood, this was a massive pain because all the torches in Gloomwood are going to be dousable. They are currently dousable, even though we haven't given the player the water arrow equivalent yet. And all the electric lights have to be destroyed because the player's got a gun. And I know that like we were stuck on this for a while. We even had like a conversation with a couple of the engineers at Unity, and we like explained the problem to them, and they were just like, why don't you just use like the dynamic lighting system? And we're like, no, we're trying to make a game that looks like it came out in like 2000. We're trying to do this. And eventually one of our internal engineers, Zombie, he essentially made what's basically called a composite light map system. So you do like a layer of like, here's this torch light, here's this like electrical light over that now. The way that the Thief does its sound propagation system is essentially the level designers pick out these rooms, essentially. They make boxes of the shapes of structures. So like, you've got the dining room and the hallway that leads to the dining room, and then it makes like portals between those boxes. Those shapes define how sound moves through the level, because if you don't do any of that, sound just freely moves as a direct, point A to point B, and that means it will go through a wall. What a lot of games do is if there's a wall in the way, it will muffle the sound. That's like the cheapest, easiest way to do things. But Thief's really interesting because an enemy can be around a corner and you can still hear them very clearly if the sound has a short path to you. The cool aspect of Thief's system that I really love is like you can close a door and the sound will become muffled, or you can open a door and the sound will start flowing freely. Like that's such a cool immediate feedback of how the system is playing out in the game world.
Hey, what was that?
I wanted to sort of like expand on that in a couple different ways. So we have like the door stuff where like it muffles sounds. But we also have windows, and those muffle sounds too, but I wanted to make it so, you know, if the player shoots out a window or an enemy shoots out a window, then the sound starts flowing through the window space where, like, where the window was. So, like, it allowed us to start getting players to start thinking about how their sounds reverberate. Like, oh, you know, if I'm going to try and, like, kill this guy, maybe I should, like, close these doors, close this window, and make sure none of the sound goes out. This system hasn't really made it into the game yet, but I also wanted to start playing around with sound masking, where essentially you can turn on a loud object like a generator and it will mask loud sounds. So like Thief 3, the like Oceanside Manor had like the lightning that happened every now and then, and like it lit you up, and I was like, oh man, that's really cool. I wonder if it works for sound too. So for a little bit I was trying to like, you know, do loud things right with the syncing with the lightning bolt, but I don't think it worked like that. That's like an element of like, oh man, it'd be really cool if you could sort of simulate this, but the challenge, of course, is you have to balance around all these elements.
I am going to cut you into pieces.
Let's talk about the guards then. Let's talk about the huntsmen and sort of how they play into this, obviously, because they're sort of like the ultimate feedback for the player as well. How did they, you know, start out? How different are they from how they are now? Did they always have traffic lights in their heads?
No, they didn't. The traffic light thing was interesting because it was also originally put in place to solve the other problem that the demo guards had, which is that they didn't have voice lines.
Clumsy friend.
A lot of people kind of forget this now, but the demo that we released a couple years ago, all the guards just made grunts or like, you know, very gurgly sounds when they spotted you. I essentially was like, you know what, I kind of feel like the guards do need their own voices. Not only is it going to really help with the readability if we add more stuff that they can pay attention to, like, oh, the door, someone left this door open, someone took this item, or someone, you know, Bill isn't guarding the spot anymore. It also puts a lot of personality in the game. You play something like Thief, and so much of it is listening to the guards talk, listening to their different, like, barks, getting a lot of their, like, personality from that.
Must have been rats.
And I wanted that feeling out of, like, Gloomwood. I felt like it wasn't quite there. We didn't have that, like, sort of emotional attachment to what is ultimately the punching bags that you're playing against. There's this real from Bloodborne of like all these voices that never made it into the game.
Okay.
Like, outsider, come out, we know you're here, and they never made it into the game. But I remember going through the cut voice lines and being like, that's awesome, I love that. The other one that I really liked is Victor Saltspire from Vermintide.
Have I ever let you down?
So we like sort of like combined all these different elements, and we sort of got these guards that are clearly like messed up and clearly like terrible people, but they're also really funny.
I love a good hunt.
There's this guard later on who is cutting meat, and when you get close enough to him, he just starts shouting like, axe goes in, blood comes out, which is clearly like a Simpsons reference of like, you know, knife goes in, guts come out.
That's what Osaka Seafood Concern is all about.
Knife goes in, guts come out. That's what Gloomwood Meatpacking District is all about.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Just all those kind of lines where it's just like we're just having fun. We're like, this is absurd. It's funny. It fits the world. We're just having a blast.
So one aspect of game design that both survival horror games and immersive sims share in its, I guess, importance is level design. Stuff like the pacing of threat, how much of the level the player sees at any one time. and when and where you can save your game. So next I'm going to ask Dillon about the crucial work of level design. And by the way, if you'd like to watch the uncut version of this interview and support our independent team, make sure you sign up to our Patreon and get access to that, along with dozens of other exclusive interviews and features.
Gloomwood has kind of changed over the years over like what exactly it was supposed to be. I've always been inspired by immersive sims, so it was always supposed to be in that sort of vein. The like really fiefy kind of feel to the game, that was something that sort of developed more over time. I didn't really set out to make like, oh, I'm gonna make, you know, my own Thief immediately. The interesting thing about like horror and the immersive sim genre is that like, or specifically the stealth immersive sim genre, if we're talking about like Thief and Dishonored and such, they actually work quite well together, but there's also parts where they push against each other. Immersive sims are technically kind of like an empowerment genre. It's not like empowerment in like the traditional way where we give you the minigun from the chain gun from Doom. It's different than that. It's an empowerment of like player choice. Like, horror, on the other hand, is all about disempowerment. It's all about vulnerability. But at the same time, when you design a level for something like Thief or like other stealth horror games, you're taking the level and you're breaking them down into zones. And the way that the player sees it is they have the zones that are safe, they have the zones that are dangerous, and then they have the zones that they're sort of, it's sort of murky. What makes immersive sims really strong is on the backbone of its level design. And it's a very, like, we're looking at the space and the environment and how we make these levels to have places where the player feels like, on edge, and like, I could get caught. If I get caught, I have to have like an escape plan. And areas where they're like, oh, I'm safe, like I'm in the safe room, I can relax a little bit, I can do a little bit of inventory management, restore my health and all that. That's the element that I really love about this like genre combination. Another one of Gloomwood's inspiration games is this other game that kind of gets groans out of a lot of people, which is Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth.
I knew you were going to say that,
yes.
And I'm a huge fan of that game.
Yes, it's a game that I adore, and then I talk about it all the time on Twitter, and then people play it, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this game sucks! Like, so there's this moment in Dark Corners of the Earth where you ride the bus into town, and you have to like reserve a hotel room and wander the town, and everyone is clearly like you look at just the guy running the hotel and this is bad news. Like, he already looks like half fishman. And it's great because no one's hostile to you yet, but it's very clear you're on a timer now.
I told you already. Stop your snooping around.
So there were definitely times where we were talking about like, oh, do we want to do like a section like this? Do we want to do any of those sort of like neutral elements? And we have shortcuts that are both like, oh, I'm back in this zone again. I have a shortcut to between these two areas, and I can just like skip all these enemies. And we have like the shortcuts that are like, oh, I'm back at the phonograph. I can save my game. I have this easy access to my little safe areas. I wanted that feeling of like, when you leave your little safe room, you're going out again. You're going into the survival horror, as Resident Evil and Silent Hill would put it.
You mentioned the phonograph there as well. I wanted to touch upon that. Was that always the place to save your game? And also, just like, what a unique little bit of flavor there that the sound of the phonograph is often what leads you to where the phonograph is. It's almost like a sort of hearing that sound is almost like allowing you to like exhale, I find, when I'm playing it.
The phonograph system is one of the oldest part of the game. It essentially, we always like saved the game at those points, which ended up being a point of contention with immersive sim fans, because this is again one of those areas where they sort of like they jostle. Survival horror fans totally understand why those exist. They're like, oh, it's Resident Evil typewriters. Like, I know these like the back of my hand. But immersive sim fans are very used to the quick save, quick load, I screwed up, I'm gonna fix things, or I wanna like experiment with things. I really wanted to push it to try and like get people to be comfortable with that, because I think if you get comfortable with the game and you play around the phonographs, I think it's a better game, because one of my favorite parts about Thief isn't I got caught and I quick loaded my game. My favorite parts are these chases through the manor once I've been caught. Like, oh, I've been caught, and now there's like, it's me running down a hallway and like 6 guards chasing me. Going back to the Dark Corners thing, it's like the hotel chase. It's that feeling of like, oh, I'm being pursued and I need to return back to the shadows or my safe zones. And I think the phonographs are intended to sort of enforce that mechanic, to get people comfortable with doing that. If the quick save was the default, all those like fun elements we put into like the huntsman in combat, all their fun barks, all the fun like tools they're going to be adding to deal with like combat, like bear traps and whatnot, those elements would just sort of be missed. It's almost like you're playing like a quarter of the game and not seeing, you know, the full blossom of like all these systems coming together.
Are you joking? Did you see the claws on that thing? I'm not going anywhere near it until the others bring the dynamite.
Thanks again to Dillon Rogers for talking to us about the design of Gloomwood. If you want to go play the game, it is available on Steam Early Access. It's about 4.5 hours long, I think, the current version of the game, or at least it was when it launched. I know they've been adding stuff to it ever since, so there's a decent chunk of the game to play while they're still working on it. Also, apologies to Dillon. We did actually record an interview with him for the Thief documentary we did back in, was it 2021? I think it might have been. These years are flying by. My hair is only getting grayer. We did record an interview with him, but unfortunately, fortunately for us, unfortunately for him, half of Looking Glass Studios were available to do interviews for that one. So he ended up getting cut. So apologies again, Dillon. I'm glad we eventually got around to doing it for this doc on Gloomwood. If you have any suggestions for sort of shorter little videos like this that we're sort of going to be playing around with doing here on Noclip, please put them in the comments. Like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. And a massive thanks to all of our amazing patrons here, of course, without whom none of this would be possible. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Good luck.